Ron, how are you? Okay, welcome. Let's do some news and talk about what's going on in EVE Online, but also talk about what's going on outside of EVE Online with Ivy, who comes to us as the organizer of EVE North. How's it going, Ivy?
It's going really well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Let me turn you up. If you can speak a little bit louder, that would be good because you're coming in a little lower than you are. And if you can't, that's okay. We'll maybe work on it in post. Um,
I will do my best. I'm sorry.
yeah, that's fine. Hold on a second. Ron, just don't speak up because you will come out a lot louder than she is. Or I'll lower you there. Okay. Okay, Ivy, hi. It's nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself in Eve first so I can figure out who you are.
So I'm everywhere. I am an in-game Diplo. I fly with a major nullsec alliance. Well, I consider them major, so don't know what the in terms of everybody else thinks, but to me, they're pretty big. I'm impressed with them. I also like to joke that the Sixth Empire, which is Max Singularity's alliance, is full of spies. So I Diplo for them also. And I help people who request of me because that's what I like doing. So I get a lot of high sec corps, low sec wormholers who like, hey, I have this situation. Can you try and Diplo? It's what I do in game. It's what I like doing.
So you're in the Sixth Empire?
I do have a tune, yes.
Are you also a cosplayer? Because you kind of look familiar.
I stand out in a crowd. I'm 6'2" and a tall redhead, so I tend to get noticed.
Okay, so
But no, I don't.
I have seen pictures of you then.
Very likely, probably yes.
Is that 6'2" with or without boots?
Without.
Wow. I'm 6'2" without boots. Wow. Okay, and are you from Toronto?
So I don't live in Toronto exactly. I live a couple hours north of Toronto, in a little country town, which is what I like. I'm not gonna lie. I like the slower, um, less hustle bustle of the city. So yeah, but I travel to Toronto to do the meets and do everything Eve North related, and it's what I like doing.
Well, it's great. So CCP is on a world tour. They've gone to, I believe, already Amsterdam. I don't know if they've gone beyond that. Have they gone to St. Petersburg yet?
I believe Russia is May 4th. I apologize to those event organizers if I completely got your date wrong, but I do believe the next stop is the 4th, and then the 23rd, the weekend of the 23rd is when Eve Down Under.
Eve Down Under, right? And then it's Eve North's turn, right? And that's something that you're. Whoops. Sorry, I was watching the Mueller report. Um, that's something. So Eve North is something that you're really familiar with. Why is that?
Well, I am the lead event organizer for Eve North. I started going out to the meets, just the general monthly meetups, because it was nice to, talk Eve and meet some of the players that you talk to in game, in real life. And then from there in 2017, I went to my first fan fest and I ran into um, the Eve meet organizer. His name is Tim, or in game he's Mythos, and he says to me, "Hey, I have this really important meeting. Can you come with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, bud. Like, what do you need? I'm willing to help. I want to get involved." And he leads me, and I was talking with Reload last night, so he leads me down this corridor to like the middle of nowhere in the Harpa, and the smallest, shortest person I've ever seen in my life is standing there. And I had no clue the significance of CCP guard at the time because I was still really new to Eve. And Tim's like, "Yeah, Ivy's gonna pitch Eve North," and I'm like, "Okay." So I pitched CCP coming to Toronto. And then from there, it just kind of grew and evolved. And like Guard was fantastic, Falcon was fantastic, and just hey, get your player counts up. Hey, well, you're not big enough for a full meet, but keep doing what you're doing, maybe, and just enthusiasm and encouragement. And then finally, I got an email for 2018 post Vegas as I was landing, and it was from Guard Tim, and he's like, "Hey, is anybody in Vegas?" So I emailed Guard directly, and I said, "Hey, I'm in Vegas. Do you want me to come find you?" And he's like, "Yeah." So I, immediately go over to the link, and I'm looking for Guard, and I run into him, and he's like, "So how do you feel about doing this in Toronto next year?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "Oh my god!" And then he made me not tell anybody all weekend long, which was horrible.
Torture.
It was. But I like I said in the with Reload last night, like I walked around Vegas on cloud nine because like how many people can say that they get the opportunity to work with CCP and hold an event for something that you like doing? And I love seeing the players get together, and I love seeing people who only talk to each other over comm suddenly meet in real life, and like the hugs and the, hey, how you doing, and like the stories, and it meets everybody's blue. It doesn't matter who you fly with, everybody's just so nice.
Well, that's cool. And so, how? I think you're still organizing because I've heard there's now a call for speakers for Eve North. Is that right?
Yes, we've put out a request for some people who want to do panels. I'm making no promises for who actually is going to get in. We have had a lot of positive feedback from the community. A lot of people have ideas. So now it's just a matter of, going through all of these requests and, seeing what we actually want to present at each.
Yeah. All right. So that's pretty exciting. You're working with CCP and you've kept it quiet. Now it's announced. What mode are you in now?
We are still full tilt in planning because I wanna show people that Toronto is a great place to come out to our meets. So there's still a lot of planning going. There's still a lot of organizing. I don't want to say that we're kind of in a lull and not doing anything, because that's from the far from the truth. I have a great team of team leads. Like Nolan, Apo, Matt, like all of these guys have gone over and above. I've gotten, outside of assistance from Grey Gal, just, offering support with, hey, this is how you should run some volunteers. And just like tips and tricks and wisdom. And my team has been phenomenal. And I'm like, hey guys, okay, this is what we need to do. And then people go and they get all the information and they bring it back to me, and then I roll with it, and we've done so much, and I'm really excited to show people what we're gonna bring to you for Eve North.
Yeah, I lived in Toronto, I think in 2005 before I played Eve, and I love that city. I think it's one of the best cities in North America.
Yeah, I'm always a fan. Like any excuse to go into the city, I'm all over it. Like I said, I don't want to live in a big city, but give me a chance to go there, I will. And the nice thing about like the venue location that we took time to pick, and the activities that we're doing, we wanted to make it, in an area where there was lots of things to do for like maybe those people that don't want to go on the pub crawl and don't want to do that. There's so much to do in the general vicinity of the Delta. It's amazing. Like I call it a family friendly event because there's going to be things for everybody to do.
Yeah, actually, unlike, say, Finland, where you're going to somebody's house, which I don't think the general public's invited to that, but there's other places too. Like, it takes a city to kind of make an event happen because you have to have like other things that you can do, not just going for that one convention, especially a convention that's rather small like Eve. It has one topic, and really it's not a typical convention with a bunch of vendors and, different sessions and stuff like that. So you need the city to kind of support more things to do if you're going to make a trip all the way over there. And do you think that Toronto kind of fits that with kind of the diversity of things that you could do, uh, either downtown or around the museum areas or the even the island that's off Toronto?
Oh, without a doubt. I think Toronto definitely is going to deliver and suit everybody's cup of tea and what their preferences are. The other fun fact, which I'm sure people know, or maybe you don't know, it's also coincidentally the same weekend as Pride. So Toronto is going to be a very, very busy place, and there's going to be a lot of stuff to do all over the city. So if people want to go and wander and go see what Toronto has to offer, like right across the street there's the CN Tower and there's the aquarium, and just down the street there's the museum, the ROM, and then up Church Street, like there's going to be so many festivities going on due to Pride. It's going to be really busy that weekend. So like I said, it's going to be family friendly fun because there's going to be too much for people to do, and I think that that's phenomenal.
Yeah, Church Street. That's a fun street. And also Queen Street East, I think, is a neat area. They have like
Like,
restaurants and record shops.
Like I said, there's something that entertains everybody, which is why I think this is a fantastic move and opportunity for us, with in conjunction with CCP's help. Like I think this is a very smart city placement choice for holding.
Yeah, that was Queen Street West. I don't know. I think I said Queen Street East. It's West. Yeah, and Pride, where does that mostly take place, by the way? Is that all over the city?
I dragged you back in, Ivy.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you so much.
sorry about that. Does Pride in generally the same area, like near downtown?
They're up more towards Church Street, which is a good 20 minutes away, but with like the subway system and everything, I don't see getting around the city being that big of an issue for people who do want to go and park.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that Pride happens near Church Street.
Well, we can giggle at that another time and day, but
I think it was my I had gay roommates. There were a couple for about 4 years in West Hollywood when I lived there, and I think that there was something about church. They were going to church meant something, but I forget what it meant. Uh, anyway, so it's going to happen in the Delta Hotel on June 22nd and 23rd. Is that right?
we're actually advertising that we're from the 21st to the 23rd. We're going to do our registration on the Friday, and then I have activities planned for people who are coming out the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday, and then even after Eve North, for those that want to figure out how to make their way down to Niagara Falls, we're going to go do stuff on the Monday. So, like, come out and let's make an event of it and have some fun.
Right, Niagara Falls. Let's have a look at Niagara Falls. It's really impressive. I think it's the second biggest water volume falling, second to maybe Iguazu, which is in Brazil and Argentina. But it is one of those what marvels of nature.
I would 100% agree with that. And like the fact, like Niagara Falls, like there's like the Maid of the Mist. You can actually go like on a boat right up to the falls. You get really, really wet. They now have zip lining beside the falls. They have Clifton Hill. There's like a Mario golf cart track where you can like go kart around like this Mario track. It's pretty fun. I've done it. I'm not gonna lie. But there's just so much to do. There's like the wax museums. There's like old time westerny photos and stuff to do. There's a butterfly conservatory. There's the birds of paradise. There's a lot to do in Niagara also, which is why I want people to if they're making the trip to come to Toronto, don't miss the opportunity. It's only an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours tops away. Take the drive, take the time to see it, have fun.
Yeah, I think that's the funny thing about Niagara Falls is that the Canadian side is the side that's really built up into like a mini Las Vegas. Really, it has a skyline and everything.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, it's pretty busy on the Canadian side.
Yeah, the Canadian side. The American side is like a little town. There's nothing there.
I was gonna say that I've heard that the
Wait, wait,
Canada
wait! I have to
side is
turn you down.
really, really nice.
Go ahead.
That's what I've heard is the Canada side is really, really nice, and the New York side is, so-so. But I just wanted to correct. Victoria Falls in Zambia, Africa, is the largest waterfall because I've been there, and it's pretty crazy.
Wild. Where's Iguazu? Is that number 3 then?
I don't know.
Look that up. I want to figure that out.
Yep.
Well, okay, so let's talk about a little bit more about Eve North and what people can expect when they get there.
Well, I can tell you the limited amount of information that I can release right now. But like I said, on the Friday we're gonna have our registration, and like as we've advertised via the Instagram and Twitter, we are having a pub crawl on the Friday evening. We do have an activity planned, which I'm not going to release yet for people to do also. Saturday is going to be, we're going to have our opening keynotes. I'm hoping having some panels, not 100% sure. But then we've got the party for Lee's Palace in the evening, which that's going to be loads and loads of fun also. And then Sunday, everyday Eve North stuff, and then we've got some fun activities planned in the later afternoon and evening for people, because I'm also taking into consideration, like, even in Iceland and Vegas, like, people were planning meals with their corps and alliances. So I wanted to make sure when planning the events that people had time to go and do those social functions, which I think are key for people, and not feel like, oh, okay, well, this is happening at this time and that's happening at that time. Which one do I want to do more? I don't want people to have to make that decision. I want them to be able to, do everything, because that's what I'm here to do. Just want to throw one hell of a party for people.
I bet a 6 foot without heels redhead could probably do that.
That's the hope. That's the hope.
By the way, these rooms at this hotel look great compared to Las Vegas. They're amazing.
The rooms are gorgeous. The beds are super comfy. The view from the hotel is like, all of the rooms have glass views. Um, like this, you get the lake, and the one side of the hotel, like, you can watch like the Billy Bishop Airport, the planes take off. It's just, the skyline is amazing from the Delta. Like, the views are phenomenal, and it just makes you take like the perception of everything going on around Toronto so much differently, because now you're up so high and everything's so small, and then you actually realize, wow, Toronto's huge.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I loved about it when I lived there was it felt like it had all the trappings of a city. It had the skyline, it had the busy downtown, and it had the sprawling neighborhoods with different personalities, from Cabbage Town to was it Yorkville or something. And the thing about it has all of that. That's why they do a lot of filming there. They can double for New York City or Chicago or any metropolitan. But it was so different in that it felt safe, and you could ride your bike downtown without getting run over by a bunch of cars.
And that's one thing I do like about Toronto, is they've taken the initiative, and there's so many like bike lanes now all throughout the city. So people who do bike, which is like a fair bit of the population, and they don't have to worry about, sharing their lane with a car. They've got their own little designated lane, which I think is perfect.
Yeah, it just seemed civilized, and it was a very clean city when I was there. Like, I'd turn the corner into an alley and think like, okay, well, I'm going to have to make my way through the trash like you would in LA, right? But no, that wasn't the case. It was like no trash in the alleys of all places. So I just love that city. I think it's like the best of both worlds. You feel like you're in a city. It's definitely a metropolis. Wow, these rooms! I'm marveling. I'm looking at the rooms. I'm marveling at how beautiful all the views are. Um, and you're in a metropolis, but it feels very safe, and it feels very like inviting. And also, you really this I don't know if this matters to Eve players, but I think Toronto is very multicultural, and I come from another multicultural city, Los Angeles. But in LA, it's very much neighborhood oriented, and the younger people, you see a lot more mixture and stuff. But when I was in Toronto, I realized even back then in 2005 that it was very, very multicultural, and not just packs of different cultures, but the groups themselves are totally mixed, which I thought was much more multicultural than even LA.
Yeah, I definitely think like Toronto is unique. And maybe it's a Canadian thing too. Like, we're all so happy and friendly and constantly saying sorry, eh? but you know how that is. But like even in Toronto, you're like today, I feel like having Thai, and you can go find a Thai place, or I want this. Like even just the food options in Toronto is it's fantastic. Whatever you're craving, you can find.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love this city. I wish I was going. I may go actually. That maybe I'm trying to work it out, but I would really love to go to Eve North in Toronto. I'm trying to work that out, so we'll see what happens. But it would be fantastic to be there and hang out with you and this big party that you're throwing. It sounds like it's gonna be a great time.
Well, if you are deciding to come, like we're 85% sold out. We are anticipating a sellout. So for those who don't have your ticket and want to come, I'm suggesting very highly that maybe you should get it sooner than later.
85% sold out, huh?
That we are.
Are you allowed to say how many people are gonna show up, or is that confidential?
I can't give exact numbers, but I can tell you that over 400 tickets are sold so far.
Wow, that's going to be a really nice party. And does the convention actually happen in this hotel, or does it happen at a different place?
No, we have one of the things that we did with choosing the Delta is we wanted a venue location where, again, my background is I'm a nurse, so my first and foremost thought was the safety of the event goers, con goers, whatever you want to, Eve capsuleers. I was really worried about people getting safely to and from. So I wanted a venue location, and this is where Apo came in phenomenally. He's doing hotel managing and some sort of school course. And I'm sorry, Apo, I know I've completely butchered what course you're taking. But we found a venue that, we have the ballroom, we've got conference rooms, we've got breakout rooms. We've basically got it all in one, similar to what kind of like the Link setup was, but a little bit bigger because the Link, that was just too small. But that was one of the key defining factors and why we ultimately wanted to go with the Delta.
Yeah, and I see that we have Mrs. Moses and Rating on in chat here, and they will probably be streaming from Eve North, right?
I would certainly hope so.
I think they're doing the whole tour, if I'm not mistaken, which is really cool of them to do that. And confirmation they will be streaming, so there will, thank God, be a stream from Eve North if you can't make it. But I don't think there's any substitution for being there, because all the in-between bits are the fun part for a lot of people. And I don't think this will be an exception to that, because the city's going to be great. If you're going to have over 400 people and you expect it to sell out, that's a ton of Eve people to talk with. That plus the city, I don't think you can lose. So if you're anywhere near Toronto, I would strongly suggest getting those tickets before they sell out. I'm going to try to.
I look forward to meeting you. We may have met in passing in other events, but I always say to people, if you see me, come say hi. Be like, hey, how are you? I love meeting people. I love taking pictures. Yeah, I'll probably be like, hey, selfie, and you'll be like, what the heck? But that's my thing. I love meeting people. I really.
Oh, that's great. So Ivy, if you will recall from the beginning of our little talk here, is 6 foot, red hair, can't miss her. She's also, I believe, a cosplayer that was at FanFest as part of the Sixth Empire. She's a Diplo there. And so definitely say hello to her if you go to Eve North.
You
All
can't
right.
miss me. I'll have a fancy shirt on too. Like, I stand out like a sore thumb. I'm not gonna lie.
Are you gonna dress up?
No, I in thanks to like my team leaders, I've had some specialty shirts created, and some artistic content from the marvelous Ricks. He's created me some shirts for the team leaders to wear and myself, and they are amazing. I'm super excited to show people what they look like come Eve North.
Cool, another surprise. Well, good luck with everything, and let us know. Maybe we can, if we're there, we'll say hello in person, and at the very least, say hello to us through the stream if you get a chance.
I most certainly will. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Ivy, thanks for joining us for a short bit. And talking about Eve North, guys, get your tickets. Well, you can. There's only 15% left. And this is happening in June 21st through the 23rd, right? 21st through 23rd.
21st through 23rd.
Yeah, so thanks, Ivy. Thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it.
And again, thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to tell everybody about Eve North. I'm super excited and at the same time humbled by the amount of support and people excited about my little event that's happening.
Well, good luck.
Thanks so much.
All right, I'm going to make an adjustment. So that was Ivy from the Sixth Empire. I'm going to make an adjustment to the sound now so that Ron can talk. Let's have a sound cue, Ron. If you're still here.
Hear that? Oh, did you hear that?
Did now, yeah. I guess it pushed to talk. Well,
you know, I think the absolute world of these player events. I kind of take like a romantic view of it, because I think that players getting together, it's one of the things that kind of makes Eve different, because we can be mortal enemies in game, but you go to a player event and it's like we're all just a bunch of fans, and everyone's hanging out with everyone, and it is a lot of mixing and matching, and it's a lot of fun. You can go and see, the pirates and this and that, and I really think that they're great for the health of the game, and really like the health of the players.
Well, yeah, I think it's all tribal, and at a certain point, when you show up at Eve events, I think the tribe that matters least is the in-game tribe, because you become part of the overall Eve Online tribe, and I think that's what kind of brings people together. That's why enemies can drink together and all that other stuff. Although I will say Las Vegas is kind of interesting. Well, I think all these things you can kind of take a certain way. One is you can go there to meet your friends. And oh, by the way, in addition to meeting your friends, there's this big convention going on that you all know about. And so you have your own little convention of your friends inside this bigger convention. And you see wormhole groups do that, and you see Horde do that. You definitely see Goons do that. Goons got their own hotel and had their own people over at this different place in Las Vegas. Horde had their own house. Test had their own house away from the strip, right? I guess they're all trying to save money, but the point is they're having their own little fan fests. And I think wormhole groups do the same thing when they get rooms in hotels, etc. Point is, you can kind of have your own little party that's isolated and then be a part of this big party as well. And then there's the other way of doing it, which is to do the convention. You go to the convention, you put yourself in public places to kind of meet people and just talk with anybody who will talk with you. And you go to like the bloggers dinner that happens on a Thursday. This is all Vegas and probably all meetups. Or you go to the convention itself and you participate in watching the speakers, whether they're players or CCP speaking. And then, of course, you go to the party with everybody else. But there's kind of different ways of doing meetups. You don't have to go there and just be a part of your own crew. You can go there and be a part of everything else, or you can go there and just be a part of your own crew. In this case,
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
In this case, Toronto, you can go there and be part of the Pride Parade as well, or Pride Weekend, which means it's going to be like a ton of parties.
And the second way is really great if you aren't part of a big crew. If you have maybe one or two friends that play Eve and you're the only one going, at least you can go. And a lot of people, like me, I wear big shirts with big dinosaurs. So come up and say hi, and oh, you're looking for so and so. I saw them over there, and very much about directing traffic and getting everybody together.
Yeah. Your point is well taken, though, that it's a big get together with a lot of Eve players. You all have at least that in common. You can literally talk to anybody and just ask them a pedestrian question like, who do you fly with? And you have an icebreaker. So it's not a lot of effort to meet people if you're a shy person at all. It's really easy. And I think that everybody that's there is really receptive to talking to people they don't know. I think they're just completely open to it. At least every experience I've had with meetups, small or large, is that as soon as you talk to somebody, they're completely open to talking to you. There's really no pretenses. So, yeah, if you've ever thought you wanted to meet other Eve players and talk about something you're passionate about, these meetups are great. It's neat that they're going on a world tour because now they come to a city near you. You should definitely go to the one near you. But if you want to travel, it's a good time to travel to a different destination and have a purpose, at least for a few days, and then you can see the rest of the city on your own. I think Toronto's perfect for that. Okay. Well.
Oh, Three Pac just had a comment in chat, and he said, as a firm believer in the law of high sec as well as James 3:15, and I can tell you, I'll be honest, all of that stuff goes away, man. When you're at the meetup, it's not a big deal. No one cares. It's funny. We'll all have drinks. It's there just for the fun, and that's one of the great things, that it's not a big deal. It's fun.
Yeah, I think if you're worried about it, don't be. Even people that aren't liked, they'll end up talking. We'll see. There's Ivy in public Discord, Talking in Stations. Check it out. Talk to Ivy, ask her questions. Go meet her if you go to Eve Vegas. Sorry, Eve North. If you can't make Eve North, if you're in the US, try to make Eve Vegas. Do something. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so we got other stuff to look at. Most of the stuff will be taken care of with the bigger shows, but since we're around and hanging around, we might as well talk about this Brisc review that just came out on the same day that we'll talk about this on the same day that the Mueller report just actually finally came out. The press is going through that, so it's kind of neat. We have our own little Eve political, what do you call it, investigation going on at the same time that the U.S. is going through an investigation too. So I think there was a lot of discussion about this as well. It seems like CCP is kind of fumbling a little bit here. They put out this initial announcement, and not only did they put it out, but they really put it out. They put it inside the game client basically, and so everybody could see it, even if you weren't really someone that kept up with news. And this was a few days ago, and it basically said that Brisc was a CSM member that was being banned from the game. Well, he was first kicked from CSM, but he was also permanently banned from the game, which is pretty severe. Oh, and in addition to that, the two FCs from Initiative were going to go too for a year, which is really debilitating for an alliance to lose their active main FCs for a couple of years. That's a huge hit to a group that's not just a small group or even part of a small coalition. This was Initiative, which is a very active part of the Imperium as far as going to war, especially with NC in the north. So it was a big blow. It was a big blow in the game. It was also a big blow out of the game because Brisc had kind of worked his way onto the CSM, playing the role of a politician and kind of blurring those lines. So when he was said to be acting against NDA and essentially corrupt, using information to enrich his friends, that really bit back into real life as well. As you can imagine, as somebody whose work is really based on trust and appearances of, appearances of integrity and stuff like that, that really kind of bit back. And it wasn't hard to figure out who Brisc was in real life, and PC Gamer made it even easier by printing his name 16 times, his real name and his real work, and saying this guy here is kicked out of a video game for being for breaking rules, basically. So that was what happened last week, and it was a big deal. And there was a lot of people that what just wasn't sitting well because these guys have a lot of character witnesses. Pando's been on the show a few times. He was our Talking in Stations player, most influential player of 2018 last year. Incredibly nice guy. He's a river to his people, as Lawrence of Arabia, I forget the character's name, says. And the river means that all the wealth flows through him to his people. That's why he's a river. He doesn't hold up all the wealth for himself. So he's that kind of a guy, and for him to get banned for corruption, especially financial corruption, just didn't fit. It also didn't fit that Brisc is somebody that, again, we all are character witnesses for him. He's on the open comms as a permanent member of their staff there, and he's, trying to do his best to represent CCP and also represent the players to CCP. So it didn't fit that the man of the people in that way was going down for corruption. In Dark Shines, I don't know much about him, but it just seemed like he was also somebody that had a lot of integrity. So the crimes didn't seem to fit the people. And above that, it was really astonishingly final solution for Brisc to be banned from the game, which seemed like that crime must have been something extraordinary, not an accidental stumbling. It should have been something that was conspiratorial, and that didn't seem to fit either. So you have this doubt that kind of lingered for a long time, for days and days, and kind of built pressure up. And I think CCP felt like they needed to respond to it, and they did a day ago, or I think it was yesterday. And they put out a second blog. Did you read that blog, by the way, Ron?
I did, and it was interesting. It was almost like they were kind of propping open the door, I guess. At the end of it, they were like, hey, we're going to investigate. And, if there's any, errors in our part, we will, rectify them. So I thought it was interesting. I don't know really what to make of it, though. You know what I mean? Like, what do you kind of make of it?
Well, there was a few things that kind of stood out to me, and everybody else. We at Talking Stations all filled into public and had 15 people discussing it for hours and hours and hours and hours. And what it seemed to me is that it was CCP's attempt to kind of calm people down, to say we're not unreasonable. We've opened the door of communication with these players. If they said it's a big coincidence and it's a big misunderstanding, and we're willing to look at it. But the key reading of it was we're listening to these players, and then there was that last paragraph, which is what a lot of people drew attention to, that said if we CCP have done something wrong, as you would expect, that's important. As you would expect, we will apologize and clean up the mess that we made, basically. And that led a lot of people to say, oh, CCP is softening the ground for a reversal. So I thought that was notable. In my opinion, I think what they were trying to do was to say, we don't want to be unfair. So we're just telling you that we're going to look at this, and if we did something wrong, we're going to take it back. They're basically not wanting to be unfair, and that's what their goal was. But it came across as more than that. It came across as softening the ground for a reversal. Let me bring up that actual thing, the actual dev blog.
And have we heard any more about what the actual thing was? I mean, I have, inklings, but I haven't heard anything like it is about this. Or have Pando and those guys, have they figured it out yet, or and said anything?
Have they figured out what it was that got them into trouble? You mean?
Yeah, have they figured it out?
No, they. I think Sister Bliss claims to have knowledge of what it was that got them into this mess, and he said after the investigation they would release that information or something like that. And he said that on the Meta Show. But from my best knowledge of talking to people who are involved and outside of it, or who might have information that leads to better inferences. I don't think they know exactly what it is, and they assume that it is Moloch, a selling of a Moloch. And the reason the selling of a Moloch is a big deal is because it was sold after the summit, which means Brisc at that point knew that there were going to be balance changes that were coming. Now, we all know those changes. Those changes are that Fax's repairing ability of capital ships is going to be nerfed in April. And so that having a single expensive ship was not a good idea because you couldn't as easily save it. There was a time where you could put enough faxes down to save any ship, including these super expensive faction titans. So it was kind of worth having them. If you had a big fight, you could put them out there and as a display. And chances were, if you put enough faxes out there, you could, kind of save it. So the idea may have been, or at least one of the theories was, that if you sell the Moloch, you're selling that single target because it can't be defended as well. And instead, you're turning that into multiple targets, a bunch of titans. And that just looked like they were spreading out spreading out the power, basically. Like trade one ship for like 5 or 10, and that way if you lose one of 5 or 10, it's not as big a deal. That is completely, like, I don't want to call it tinfoil because it's not tinfoil. It's very logical. It is based on the information that we know. What we don't know is that what CCP looked at and said that is evidence of insider knowledge, because that trade happened, we assume, before it was announced publicly what would happen there. And that might have been what triggered it. That might have been. But the counter to that is that initiative people will tell you that there's evidence, and they could prove it by emails and logs, that Darkshines, the guy who sold the Moloch, was trying to sell that anyway beforehand because he wanted to get out of it. Thought maybe it was a waste of, wealth or something.
I think that makes logical sense, but I don't, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think that that's enough, to kind of get all three kind of three big names swept up in this kind of RICO Act kind of, prosecution. I, I know people have kind of, dropped little hints and this and that on Reddit about, I think it has to be something that has to do with market manipulation. That's just me personally. I
So you
think
think it's
market
something else?
manipulation, yeah, I think it's something else. And I think that, if we knew what we were looking for, we could look at the market and see spikes on particular days or something. I think it has to be, and this is just me, and this could be tinfoil hat though.
Okay.
I think it has to be market manipulation on a game scale, that it affects a majority of people, because I think that point it gets into that range of, hey, you were trying to manipulate the game, or you're affecting the game in some manner. And hey, let's drop the ban hammer. Let's RICO act all of them, drop the ban hammer, and then, everyone kind of throws up their hands and they start complaining. Well, let's double check everything. Let's go back and make sure. But if it is market manipulation, I mean, it makes, perfect sense, right? Like a particular, mineral or an ore or something. I'm not sure, but people have dropped hints, but I still don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's other theories of what could have gotten them in trouble. Like, we do know they got in trouble in some way. Whether they deserved it or not is the question. But CCP saw something they didn't like and made this enormous decision that may be biting them in the ass. Who knows? Or they may basically come forward and say, look, this is how. Look, we made a decision. We're going to stick by that decision. These guys are gone, at least for a year, for 2 of them. And if you are not convinced, then here's the trail of evidence that shows that, and they would produce airtight evidence. Like, that is a possibility of what could happen. It feels unlikely, but it is a possibility. Instead, if they're reviewing the evidence, then you have to suspect that they are not confident enough in it to basically say, we're not going to review it because we know we're right. And that's what a lot of times what happens is CCP will not even hear an appeal, but they're actually hearing an appeal here. So that brings doubt to the certainty of what they acted on in the first place. But I do agree that the Moloch thing is what we know, what we've thought it could possibly have been. It's a big enough thing to show up on the radar. I think Brisc inadvertently put himself on the radar when the CSM, his fellow CSM members said, "Look, Brisc, you wrote Pando from, from inside the CSM Winter Summit. Like, that's not okay." Brisc totally explained it, and they were all okay. And first of all, it's not okay to them. It's not necessarily a breach of NDA. I think what Brisc wrote wasn't a breach of NDA according to him and others, but what it was unseemly that you were corresponding with a player while you're in here, kind of like being a representative for all the people. You're directly tied into your FC from your initiative, and that's unseemly. And you're talking about what CSM is doing. Even if it doesn't break NDA, you shouldn't be doing that. And he said publicly that he was the guys didn't like that very much. And so I'm sure they told him. But the CSM probably, and actually certainly somebody, at least one, maybe more, maybe multiple, told CCP, hey, Brisc is doing this thing, you ought to know. Now, if what he was talking about to Pando at the time was led to something, that is not clear. I don't think that's what happened. That would be too big a strain. I think what happened is that put Brisc on the radar of CCP, and CCP is looking at that saying, yeah, we got to watch not only Brisc, because we watch all the CSM members, CCP does with their internal investigations, but we got to watch everybody around him that he talks to. And that's what put Pando and Dark Shines on the radar as well. And so when something happened with Dark Shines, we know it was him, then there could have been a backtracking to Brisc talking, and that might be it. And that's, again, conjecture, because we don't really know what CCP is actually kicked them for. And as you're saying, it could be something else. You think it's a market manipulation. Why do you think it's a market manipulation? There are two theories, by the way, before we go into it. One is that it was a giant Plex sale, and another one could have been, somebody brought this up, it could have been faction gun announcement. And yet a third could have been, I forget, there was a new thing that happened recently, or something we haven't even seen yet, a change that we haven't even seen yet. But why do you think it has to be something like market manipulation?
Yeah, I think, I just think that the crime, the severity of the crime or something, warrants this sort of swift action, right? Like, it has to be something, in my mind, it has to be something that could affect everyone. And I don't even know if it has to be, that someone was on the radar as much as, so we'll role play a little bit. You are CCP Falcon and I am CCP Falcon Jr. And we know that, let's say, as an example, the Hall guns, right, are going to get nerfed or something. And we see, 2 weeks before, this kind of huge dump of Hall guns. And, we're just kind of like looking through it, and you're like, what is this all about? Like, this doesn't happen, you know, and then you just, look through the records and you're like, well, what kind of relationship do they have, right? Like, kind of follow the bread trail. I just think, and one of the kind of hints someone dropped on Reddit was, oh, everyone in the know kind of knows, and it's, look on, what did they say? Something like March 22nd for this particular spike or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I think, right? Like, it has to be something, drastic or something that could alter the game, because that is one thing that CCP takes intensely serious, right? Like, is, and even I even remember this was a couple of years ago, and it was for the AT, and it was CCP Rise, and he was there, and he was like, and I remember him saying, he was like, yeah, I didn't get anything on Tranquility because I wasn't sure how to spawn it, and so even he was, kind of cautious about spawning things on the real server. So, you know,
Yeah,
I
Falcon
think
gets
that
talked to
that's
by
just really,
internals. Their what do they call
yeah,
it? Internal Affairs Department. They even tap him on the shoulder.
yeah,
But the thing
yeah.
about the internal, I believe one of the internal affairs guys, their main guy or really good guy, is no longer with the company. It hasn't been for a year. So there might be a different level of scrutiny from internal affairs. It might be oversensitive and not as accurate, which may have caused this hiccup. I don't know. It may not. Maybe they have a policy and the knowledge transfer from somebody who's left to the people that are there is really good. And this is actually something that they're just going to lay out in front of us and say, look, see, we did it right. But now they've left wiggle room for doubt. So nobody's happy now. The people who were for Brisc getting removed, like wormholers in general, not all, but in general, wormholers resent him for stuff done in the past. We're like, yeah, let's make this the biggest story that we can, and that tells me something. Brisc isn't universally well liked, so you have people who were happy about seeing Brisc go, and then you had people who were happy to see Pando go because he's a powerful FC and Dark shines. So you had people who were happy on one end. Well, CCP kind of sending a signal that they will review and possibly reverse themselves now makes nobody happy because the defenders of Brisc are feeling better, right? That CCP didn't just clamp down, double down, and say, we're not going to admit we're wrong. We'll do more damage to ourselves if we do. So even if we are wrong, we're not going to reverse ourselves. Would have been terrible for Pando, who's actually in the audience now, Dark Shines, and especially Brisc. But they're not doing that, which is a really good thing that CCP will do that, especially for these three guys. But the supporters now can breathe a little easier that there's a review process that might lead to the actual reversal, and that makes them a little bit happier. But they're still really mad too because this whole thing happened in the first place. So CCP is in a terrible position right now after these bannings and then the consideration of a review process because nobody's happy about it.
I think it would be very hard to make everyone happy. I think a lot of, it's, what is it? What's the word? Schadenfreude or something, where
Schadenfreude,
people
yeah,
just kind of, yeah,
German.
yeah, yeah, where
For
people
me,
just kind of celebrate.
they celebrate your misery, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
well, but CCP, to their credit, then is doing something that's not making anybody happy, but they're doing the right thing. I think there's room to. I think that's a fair thing to say. They're doing the right thing in that they're reviewing this to make sure they got it right because it's a big deal.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that this recent, number one, they gave it the same prominence that they gave the initial, which I was very happy about, right? Like, put it in the launcher. You put the initial kind of, not accusation, but the penalty, I guess the penalty email in the launcher. All right, put this one in the launcher as well. But what I like about this is they're saying, hey, it's not an open and shut. We're willing to look and we're willing to investigate and this and that, and we'll double check, right? We hear you. I think it's great. I think I think it's very, um, I don't know, noble, I guess, that they are willing to double check. Maybe because they are, prominent figures or something like that. But on the same token, if it is what I think, which is some sort of market manipulation, um, then I'm glad that they took this route and they stopped it immediately in its tracks. Even after they did an investigation, they just stopped it immediately and then they're still willing to go back and double check, right? I think that's a good play.
Well, they're in it now, so there's no way out. I think the only way out now is to, uh, have this reach some conclusion and then let people start to forget about it. But there is some lasting damage here that CCP has done to their own process, and part of that is now I think everything's in doubt about um, previous bannings. Right? There's like when you have a court case that shows that. That these people who were found guilty are actually innocent, that taints the process for everybody that came before them. Actually, that's something that Iron Bank pointed out here, and I think he's been a victim of CCP's banning and then I think unbanning, if I'm not mistaken, or given guidelines to clarify and that sort of thing. But the point is, there's a lot of people that came before this that are like, where's our due process? Where's our review? And that sort of thing. And so I think CCP is going to have to weather that storm. And I don't think it'll gain as much momentum as it needs to make everything else, be reviewed. Some of the bans, I'm sure, were fine in the past, and um, I don't think there's anything they can do about it. But it definitely kind of taints the waters for that kind of swift action. Now, the thing is, CCP is known for quick, strong action. I know some people won't agree with that because people complain about bots for a long time or whatever else, but compared to other games, uh, CCP has a reputation for basically being ruthless with players that are cheating. And I think that might be the first time that I saw that, Brisc Balls banned, and so are these two FCs, Pando and Dark Shines. When I saw that, I thought, wow, that's a big deal. But it's not out of character. This is what CCP does. It doesn't matter who you are, if you're Manfred Sidious, or Vince Draken or whoever, at a certain point, CCP takes action. It's not surprising they take actions against some of the bigger names in the game. What is surprising is that CCP will actually reconsider. That is actually more surprising than even the headline of we're eliminating a CSM member.
I completely agree, and I think that's like the interesting thing. I guess this has just caused so much hubbub, that they're like, okay, you know what? We hear you. We're gonna double check and make sure all of those connections all those lines are dotted, right?
Yeah, I see a free gigX from Albion News. Um, I'll tell you what, the gigX thing is different, and I'm not sure it's justly different, but it is different. There's a whole different shading on gigX's thing because it came after CCP basically wanted to join this league of cleaning up video games, and they should clean up video games in general. The whole industry needs to patrol itself much better than it has. There's some extremely abusive stuff that happens, and it's covered in this veil of how, I'm just kidding. It's a video game. Cheer, lighten up, Snowflake. But it's terribly wrong to do, and there's a whole league about it. And CCP signed on to be a part of that league of other game companies that are trying to crack down on trolling and abusive behavior. And I think that taints gigX's, let's call it, execution from EVE Online in a big way, because his infraction was to threaten another player, and that plays right into what they're trying to stop. And so it was really bad timing for that. If that had happened 10 years ago when EVE was a Wild West and there was a lot more rough and tumble about what you could say, what you could get away with, and there were a lot less rules, I don't think gigX would be gone today. But it happened right at a time when the industry's trying to clean itself up from exactly what gigX did in public, in front of everybody, in an undeniable way. And I don't think you can't unravel that. The only thing you can do is get mercy from CCP. And I don't think CCP's in the business of really being merciful. I think what you're seeing here is not mercy. What you're seeing here is, oops, we might have acted too quickly. Maybe. I don't know.
So just to counter that just a little bit, I I think the real life threats thing, I completely agree. Real life threats have no, business, right? In video games or any of the, it's silly. You absolutely, treat them with the hammer and that kind of thing. But, on the same token, I think that a lot of people use the real life threats thing as sort of like they call it quote rules lawyering unquote, which is oh yeah, blah blah blah, comma in game. Like people try to manipulate the words, and I think, and if I remember right, CCP like mentioned this years ago, but something about how they didn't publish particular rules, that they wanted to do it on a case by case basis because they didn't want to, the endless rule lawyering. And I think, gigX, and it's not that he's famous or not, but I mean, was that serious? I mean, you know, was he just kind of caught up in the heat of the moment and that sort of thing, or even caught up in the peer pressure, right? Like being around a bunch of people and everyone else is upset, so you get upset, and you're kind of part of this crowd. I don't know if gigX deserved a permanent lifetime ban, you know, but that's just my opinion.
As a former member of CO2 before I was in Goons proper, I can say that what gigX got banned for was a pattern of gigX on almost a daily basis internally. FC meetings, stuff like that. It would be kill yourself, a lot of things other that I can't really mention here. Well, I could, but I don't want to get kicked off the stream because they're pretty damn offensive.
Mm-hmm.
This this wasn't a one-off thing with gigX. Anybody who knew gigX and is being honest about it knows he was like this day in and day out with the "I'm gonna cut your effing
He didn't.
throat
Oh,
if you don't get on this fleet."
all right. So that was his way of speaking. Well, let's make something clear though,
He
because somebody
spoke like
asks.
a Slavic gangster, essentially.
Well, I think that's a bias though, because he was Slavic. I think there's some racism in there myself. But let's talk about Kane's question. What did he say? And I want to make something clear about gigX. gigX didn't say what people say he said. So if you read it, even in PC Gamer, he didn't actually say, I'm going to cut your hands off or threaten him in that way, and threaten the judge, because the judge is who had pissed him off at the time. What gigX said was use your hands while you can, which meant because he was, and that doesn't come out of nowhere. The context was that the judge was writing in Alliance, or he was writing, typing on the keyboard. And so the threat comes from gigX to use your fingers while you can, basically. Use your hands while you can. Something along those lines, which can mean a great number of things. But because he is a Slavic player, which is paramount to doxing, right? Unless he said it or people knew it. But in Eve, the doxing thing doesn't work very well because there's a lot of gray area. But we all know that gigX is from Eastern Europe, I guess. Let's put it that way. And I think there's a lot more attributed to him, maybe because I wasn't in CO2, but maybe because he talks in a more coarse way. I don't think that makes him a gangster, but there's this whole thing about the Russian mob that kind of follows, that cloud kind of follows that people around that are Slavic or whatever. And I think that may be why people were so easily able to grasp that he would do something so hideous as to cut somebody's hands off. I think that was kind of an unfair bias.
I don't agree at all in that one. It was very specific to gigX. A lot of the other people that happened to be Slavic, from Bosnia Herzegovina and all that, were pretty decent dudes. gigX was the one exception, to the point where right before I got the invite to Goons, about a month before, he literally had a revolt in the fleet where everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people left his fleet because he was communicating death threats to people.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I assume you're accurate, but I don't know. I didn't hear that much about those kinds of things. I just know that he was a different kind of FC, in that he would attack, and not do a lot of the preparation, and he wouldn't do his own scouting, stuff like that. Those kinds of FC rumors were all I've heard about his fleets. I didn't know that his fleets had people rebelling against him because he was threatening
there's a guy you can talk to anytime you want. If you want to reach out to him, he still plays Eve. His name's Industrial Obliterator.
Mhm.
He will tell you all about the wonderful times of gigX and stuff like that.
All
I
right.
think
Well,
it all comes down to speaking styles, and different cultures have different speaking styles, and people from Australia, joking and in a loving way, kind of call me words that I can't mention, ever. So
There's a certain word
it's
that's a
just,
term of endearment,
yeah,
even
I
though it's
mean,
offensive everywhere else. Is that what you're speaking about, Ron?
yeah, I think it's all different, and I just, a perma ban, on someone who's been playing for a very long time. And I'm sure it is taken seriously, but that should just be taken seriously, and I'm sure it is on CCP's end. But and that's why I think it's got to be something big, with the NDA breach and what.
let me just make a quick public announcement, public service announcement. This is Streamfleet on Twitter, which is at Streamfleet_Eve. And it's had a sad update on the number SS I2, which I think is the invitational tournament they were going to have. And here's the announcement. For technical reasons, we have needed to make a postponement. Thank you for understanding. So the tournament from Streamfleet is actually postponed. You can check that out again, Streamfleet Twitter, and that is at Streamfleet_Eve. You might as well
It's
follow them over
unfortunate.
there. Okay, yeah. So let's stop talking about gigX because that was a while ago. I just think that regardless of what people think on pro or against gigX, that I think is sufficiently different than this ban that Brisc got, that it doesn't really merit the same kind of comparison. I also think the context was completely different, and we'll leave it at that instead of a judgment call on gigX's character or speaking style.
Apples and oranges.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, so that's it. So the interim statement was on Brisc Rubal is the follow-up investigation, which I think alone merits talking about it, and that's what we have done today. I'm pretty sure that we've kind of talked that one out, although a lot of people love talking about it. If you want to, talking stations, jump into public and discuss it. People have for the last 24 hours. I think this is one of those things that has generated a lot of conversation because a lot of people have the ability to participate. You don't have to be a great FC to participate in this. You don't have to know the game in and out or figure out the lore. There's no right answer. There's just hunches. There's just predictions and stuff like that. So it's a fun thing to participate in, which I think is why it's so talked about so much. But aside from being able to participate in this thing, there are a few things about this that make it very interesting for anybody who's an EVE player or not, and that is just how many different ways this cuts, which is something I've been thinking about writing about. I know I keep mentioning I'm thinking about writing about this and that. It's the time and the effort. But one of the things that really interests me about this whole Brisc Rubal situation with Pando and Darkshines is just how many different ways it represents themes in EVE Online that are very difficult to see initially or even appreciate, but have huge ramifications almost for the future of EVE Online and what it can actually shape itself into. And here's what I mean by all that. You have a guy that, not unlike myself, that leverages real life skills into the game and real life identity now that I'm a streamer and that Brisc is a public figure. I'll put that in quotations. Bringing that into the game in order to leverage that as a power to create an impression to other players, right? EVE allows you to do that. It's not that there's a class of players that don't build their reputation inside of EVE Online. There's definitely a lot of players that do, and you'll see them all listed on that 15th anniversary video where it goes through all the players. Those players mostly built their name recognition in the game. Actually, even there, I have to make an exception. You had people who were singers and people who were artists that might have been in there. that weren't like heavy hitting players. So maybe that's not completely true. But for the most part, a lot of people build their reputations in EVE Online, either by being a good FC, by being an important diplomat, to being an important CEO, or running a group of people. There's things you do in the game to build up your notoriety. And if you don't have the time to do that, or you don't want to do that because it's such a crowded field, then you come in a different way. You try to make an impression through the meta. And I think that's what Brisc did. Essentially came out of nowhere and became a public figure and then a CSM member. And as a CSM member, then continued to become important in that he was trying to represent players and talk to players on CCP's behalf and talk to CCP on players' behalf and that sort of thing. So in order to do that, though, he needs in-game legitimacy, which is very hard for him to find. So I think that's why you see FC sniping at him a lot, not only on the show, but in other places too. They don't want to allow room for him to talk because he hasn't earned it yet, in their opinion. So to insulate himself from that, you talk to FCs that will talk to you, like Pando and other people, and you kind of try to absorb their knowledge so that when you talk about a topic that you're as knowledgeable of that. And I think we've seen that transfer a lot with Brisc. You've seen Brisc talk about subjects that he maybe hasn't known firsthand, but he knew a lot about. And that's because he's talking to people who know a lot about certain topics. And in that way, he seems to be an organism that comes from the outside and attaches itself to FCs in a legitimate seeking way. And so when that body, because of a violation, it becomes contaminated because of a violation of an NDA, which is a very obscure out-of-game thing, Brisc has to be removed from the game body. And because it's connected to these other important parts, the FCs of initiative, that they get ripped out too. And that's what I was trying to describe the other day. It seems like an organism that has attached itself to the body host and has clamped down on certain parts of it that are important and vital for necessity to become more effective. And then CCP says we need to operate and take that part out, and it takes parts of the body with it that are very important. I just thought that was very fascinating if you look at it in an organic way.
Yes.
Well, Ron, I'm
I
glad
got you. Brisc Screwball is a parasite. That's what you're saying.
I don't attribute anything to him that I'm not guilty of in the same way, by the way. But I do feel like that is why is that important? First of all, it's interesting. But second of all, I think it talks about EVE Online in significant dimensions. One is, where's the game? Is the game in the metasphere? Is the game in this client? Because I think people will disagree on that. I see EVE as evolving, and I think Hilmar sees this to some degree too, that a lot of the game will come off the client, right? There are people asking for the ability to use their cell phone to be able to make purchases on the market. At that point, where's the market, right? It's just like real life. The market really isn't in your living room, yet you can interact with the market and make changes in real life through your mobile phone. So if you could do that in the game, then more of the game gets lifted out of the actual client. And at some point, I think the game is in your head, not necessarily a video game. And I think this moment is a moment that we will look at and say, is that a good idea? Is that damaging? Is it risky? Are real life things now threatened that weren't before because of that attachment? And if so,
I can
think it slows that down.
I can see both. I can see bad with that, right? Because I think that there is a certain way that people interact with each other inside of Eve. And that's going to be based on, the particular colors you wear, your corp, your alliance, and people talk to each other in a certain way and kind of trollish or whatever. And bringing that aspect out of the game is bad, right? And I think that's where, like Eve North kind of combats that, right? Which is when you meet people face to face, you get that empathy with someone else, and you understand that they're actually a person, and they live and breathe. They're not just, some name that you just randomly call, names or whatever. So I think that bringing that aspect out of the game, of how people treat each other, is bad. But I think it's good that, the game sort of evolves into this sort of different levels of meta, right? And you, you know, people call the meta anything that happens outside of the game, right? So like in like RP games, metaing is, when you tell someone something that their character should not know. But Eve is all about the meta because our characters, are connected really through Discord and through all these chat functions and email and I remember, you know, about a month or so ago, my hell was drifting off the Keepstar, and I got, like 4 Discord PMs, right? And then I got PMs on, Mumble, and then I start getting texts on my phone. That's the real meta, right? Like it starts to escalate. And then, one of my friends was like, dude, I was going to come over to your house, man.
Yeah.
So I think, that the metaing is one aspect. I don't know, you know, the Brisk thing, I think that that was just a catchy title. That's just kind of clickbait. Hey, it's a real life lawyer is in trouble, and it kind of makes people that have gotten trouble with games not feel as bad about themselves. I don't, but that's
Mm.
just my opinion.
Yeah. Well, sorry to get so existential, but and I do love to get existential. That's where I find the most interesting stuff, at least the way I look at Eve Online. Um, but I do think the reality is we'll know more in a few days, maybe a few weeks. I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't think they said how long the investigation review is going to happen. Sorry, they call it an investigation, so we'll call it that too instead of a review. I also don't think we know yet what the ramifications of an investigation mean inside of CCP, which will be very interesting because, as you know, the beloved CCP guard who was in charge of CSM essentially, put there after CSM was having trouble connecting with the company very well, left. So the guy that came in to kind of fix CSM has now left. And right after he leaves, essentially the day after he leaves, you have this really, really important CSM kick happen that takes out, an alliance with it. Not completely, but hurts the alliance quite a bit. And you have to wonder if this is basically the new guy who's been in charge of CSM now, and we say that loosely because there's multiple people in charge, but it's kind of the point guy, this CCP Dopamine, who we don't know very well. We only saw him in Amsterdam, maybe for the first time publicly, is how much of this he owns, how much of the responsibility of this event he owns. It may be none. He may have been handed it. It may have been handed to him saying, here, take care of it. On the other hand, the other assumption is that he's a novice in a situation he doesn't completely understand. And maybe it's unpolished. Maybe they didn't run it through PR to figure out the company ramifications of this going public and all those sorts of things. Like where is it? Is this inexperience? Does it have anything to do with him directly? Or is this something that the whole team decided on? How many checks and balances were there? And for God's sakes, why do we need to have an investigation about something this serious? That is an important question that CCP hasn't really told us. But hopefully, maybe not hopefully, maybe they won't ever tell us. But I'm
You
curious
know,
how much of it in CCP is how hurt CCP is internally with this about their own processes.
I keep seeing people kind of memeing about like get rid of the CSM and things, and I have to say that we should all take a vested interest in making the CSM better. The CSM is unique to Eve. It's different. It it's a great way for developers to get direct feedback, and I think that we as players, are maybe, I guess, like a little spoiled because we do have such great access. When you go into a different game, you're almost, I mean, I don't want to say like talked down to, but there are so many filters to get any sort of advice or whatever to the developers that it's very, very difficult. So I think that we should all strive to make the CSM better and to make it healthy, and in this sort of thing, I just think that's so important.
Yeah. We'll end with this. We just have a couple more minutes, but there's a couple things. Sir Sill here says, I wonder if CSM would be better after this. No public figure would probably take the risk. I think that's important. I think you already see one person at least who's run for CSM 5 times, Commander A's, basically saying he won't run a 6th time because, and he's probably in the best position to actually win and get in this time, but he won't run because he's afraid that it actually will affect his public work. And so it's not a non-issue, but I do wonder, like, that same question, if CSM is going to be worth people taking, because I think the reverse of that is very important. A lot of people who run for CSM get on CSM and put it on their resume. And I think there's a lot of people who aren't afraid to put EVE Online out in public in their real lives. I, for instance, tell all my friends, not even friends, but acquaintances, and I work in LA, and I run into people from, I have friends at Blizzard, and I have friends over at, I forget what they're called, Riot Games. And, when I meet friends, they'll be like, you play EVE? Oh, yeah. And then I start talking about EVE Online. I talk about it in a serious way. I talk about it in a very adult way. And it's not gamers bonding over the game. It's the philosophy of gaming and what gaming can do and how it's played and stuff like that. It's a different level. And it's not a better level. It's just different level. And I think there are a lot of people who talk about EVE in those ways and would put it on their resume and would create, their LinkedIn and associate with it. But now, is that taking a step? Are people taking a step back from that because this can actually backfire as well? I don't know. We'll have to see how that works out. But I really want a world where EVE Online is respected as much as I respect it as a interesting place of science fiction where a lot of human behavior is analyzed. It's almost like a virtual experimentation place of psychology, So it would be interesting to see that not get hurt by these kinds of events. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about was that last question kind of derailed me a little bit. Oh yeah, we had some criticism earlier, and it was from a fan who basically said, "I love TIS, except the last show was so bad I couldn't finish listening to the Brisc segment because we were putting out too much conjecture." Especially we were roping in Sort Dragon and saying that he was the one that turned in Brisc, which we never said but wasn't true as well. Or that we were bringing in Marquis Dragon and saying that he was not trustworthy, which we didn't directly say. But the fact that somebody was confused about that was a shame on us, especially me, for saying all this stuff. So I'll just say one more time what I was trying to do. When I said that I knew that Killer Bee and Sort Dragon were sitting next to Brisc, I didn't know that for sure. Killer Bee, I think, is on the record sitting next to him. But in a picture from Brisc, you can see Sort Dragon on the left. But between Sort Dragon and the computer are, funny enough, a pair of hands that belong to the judge. That's kind of funny and ironic considering what we've talked about with his hands being threatened to be unable to be used by gigX. But yeah, there's the judge on his left. So it was the judge and Killer B on the other side as he was writing notes to himself. I'm talking about Brisc at CSM Summit. So to clear it up, Sort had nothing to do with it. I don't think there's anybody now that suspects Sort that has to do with this thing. There are a lot of people who suspect him, but they have no basis that I'm aware of. But the reason that we brought it up, that Sort Dragon and Killer B were there, and they were the ones turning in Brisc. This is the story, right? The narrative that we were putting out there to actually knock it down. The narrative was that Sort and Brisc, that Killer B and Sort were the ones that turned in Brisc in order to hurt Initiative, because those two guys are from the north and their enemy is the group that Brisc belongs to. We were bringing that up to knock it down. I don't think it's true. I don't know. But I have heard a lot of people who say, yes, this is a meta play, and it's an in-game attack using an out-of-game structure, and so you have to look at that. And there's just a lot of talk about that sort of thing. So we brought it up, and I brought it up ferociously to have it knocked down ferociously by the panel. And that's how we work at TIS. Sometimes I'll bring something up as not a straw man, but to bring up what I hear other people talking about, and then I invite criticism of it to kind of let that thing rest. Didn't go well, and we weren't clear that the TIS is not taking any kind of a side in this, for or against. So yeah, we made a mistake there to make that clear. The second thing,
And
go ahead.
and let me just add to that. So, and I can just say that, on my end, working at TIS, I have never been told what to say or how to feel on a particular matter, so we are, truly neutral. And, you'll say something, and if I disagree with it and I have a coherent argument, I'll bring it up. But so, any kind of, that sort of weirdness usually comes, from guests or that kind of thing. But we personally, we have no,
Well,
I guess,
Ron,
foot in the race.
I wouldn't say we're neutral, right? Like, you have your point of view of test, and I mean, we have points of view, but they're diverse points of view. And I think
Yeah.
we all
Okay. Yeah, that's
we all
fair.
yeah, and I think we all rise above our personal points of view. Doesn't mean we don't have them, but we try to rise above them. But your point's taken. I mean, I don't think you can have an unbiased media, or everybody's got an axe to grind. If you know Eve, you've made an enemy in one form or another, even if you've never met them. So there's always axes to grind and people to upset and stuff like that. But we all have our opinions, and we all have our in-game histories, and all that taints the way that we talk about something. But I think there's enough of us from different places that can kind of keep each other in check. That's kind of how I see that. What do you think, Ron?
Yeah, I'm with you. Kind of like I've always said, I'm more a fan of the game than I am of particular corps or alliances or people. I'm more like a student of, the kind of mechanics of the game rather than everything else, because people change alliances and people change and all the time, so the game is more important.
Right. And that's just that's who gravitates towards TIS, and that's also who we gravitate towards inviting to be a part of the voices that are here. Okay, I should wrap it up. I think that is it. I just wanted to cover that we apologize if we sounded like we were harshing on anybody on the last show. I think that was not what I heard initially after the show. There was a lot of people saying it was a good show, fun show. But in case somebody feels like we were picking a side or something like that, make sure that you know that we weren't trying to. Thanks everybody for hanging around, Ron, especially you for coming on and talking about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, Ron, like how much is this Brisc thing like I don't know, upset you is not the right way to say it, but how much has it got you thinking, I guess?
Maybe three or four.
10
No,
being
I
the
mean,
most.
honestly, it doesn't, you know,
Wow,
I,
you're not thinking about it
Br-
much.
yeah, Brisk, like, he's such a nice guy. He's such a sweetheart. Like, he will, he talks, about so many different subjects, and he's always available, to talk to people. And I've heard him in the public voice channel several times, kind of giving the points and the counterpoints of someone's view. And like, I just remember thinking, like, he's the only CSN that does that. And it really didn't surprise me, like, when, oh, he might have mentioned something. Well, he mentions a lot of things, so it didn't really surprise me that much. It wasn't really a shocker for me. And I think, people kind of spin it into, something much bigger than what it is. But I think, as long as Brisk gets his fair day, in the investigation, and people look at it, with empathy and understand, his point of view. Because if he just accidentally says something,
Mhm.
like, if I just accidentally say, hey, Matterall, oh, you're like, hey, I'm moving to Jita, and I'm like, I wouldn't move there. Is that comment, because, maybe in 2 weeks Jita's going to go away, is that comment worth 15 years of my life? I don't know. I don't think so. But, that's kind of where I'm coming from on it.
Cool. Well, all right. Have you guys, do we know what we're going to talk about on Thursday night tonight? In 12 hours, basically? No, in less than 12 hours, like 8 hours.
High sec hauling.
Wow. What can you preview about that?
There's actually a lot of money to be made in high sec hauling. A lot.
So tonight on Talking in Stations, we are going to have Ron and Artemis and Silver and some guests talk about high sec hauling. If you've ever wanted to know about it, they'll dig into this topic tonight. So make sure you join them. Actually, Artemis will be out of view because he's traveling. So I think it'll just be you and Silver on screen.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other things that we will talk about later on in this week's. Certainly the talk that is it PICB from the Chinese server is coming to our server, and I don't know if there's a story there yet because I'm not up to date on what that means, if it's real, if it's just talk. We'll talk to some contacts and find out, and we'll probably report that on Sunday. And then don't forget to watch like other shows like Open Comms and Push to Talk and Meta Show and stuff like that over the weekend. And for Talking in Stations, make sure you watch tonight as they talk about high sec hauling. And then we'll see you again Sunday. And I want to make this last pitch to you guys. If you guys like this programming, make sure you subscribe. Sorry, I always say subscribe because the language is different. But make sure you follow this channel so it alerts you to when we're going live. And if you can subscribe, do that because that's great. Any money that we get helps to improve the show. If you want to support us, you can do that through Patreon as well. That's the podcast that pays for a lot of those things. And finally, what we really want is follows on YouTube. If you could do that, we want to get up to 1,000. We roughly have anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500 people who listen to each episode of Talking in Stations, mostly through podcasts. And we only have like 600 followers on YouTube. So that's completely out of whack. And we don't usually ask for you guys to do things, but if you could, that'd be great. And then for all these things, whether you listen to it on Talking Stations, the podcast, or you're watching here on Twitch or YouTube, if you could write us reviews on wherever it is that you're able to write reviews, that actually helps as well. The way these things work is these algorithms look at certain things, and a part of that is reviews and how often people will write about you and how much they praise you and stuff like that. So we were looking to have your help in that effort. Okay, thanks everybody. I'm glad you guys are with us. We'll be back again tonight, and then Sunday, and then Tuesday, Thursday. So we'll see you then. Take care. Bye, Ron.
See you, buddy.